John to the John Goyer Memorial ALS Charity Golf Tournament. This tournament has actually been around since 1976, back when we were the Matsqui Police, but back in 2006 when we lost John Goyer, at that time we decided to rename the tournament in his honor and make it a charity tournament with all proceeds going to the ALS Society of British Columbia.
As a tribute to John and to recognize his sacrifice, we spoke with some of his friends and colleagues and others that cared about him, and this is what they had to say.
Yeah, so I met John playing hockey against him in grade 6, grade 7. By grade 8, met him in high school, and his sister lived near me. So one day I'm riding my bike, he was out on a bike nearby, and then we kind of recognize each other and say, oh, we didn't really hang around in grade 8. So hey, said hi, next thing you know, we're riding around the neighborhood, and then from then on we were buddies from grade 8 till 2006. Well, he's very competitive. He couldn't stand losing, whether he was involved much in the game or not. He was the guy that he would go out and do his role. He loved being, even if he had to be the guy that went after their top guy and, you know, get a bit scrappy and draw a penalty. He would love to do that.
In high school, John was extremely competitive. It's one of the things I loved about him. I mean, he could be a real SOB, right? He didn't like losing. And so he had a table hockey game. The old school, anybody who grew up in that era knew, best of 7 series would take one night. And so over the course of a year and a half, he beat me every best of game, best of 7. And you know, we had to win by 2 and the score went to 12, so a lot of games went like 14-12, but he always came back and beat me. So finally, after a year and a half, I beat him. I beat him in a game 7. So did John congratulate me? Did he say, well, that was a hell of a run? No, I picked the game up, smashed it over his knee, jumped up and down on it, kicked me out of his house. So that same attitude with John, though, he took into his fight with ALS. I always respected that.
Remember, most about him is his sense of humor. He had a unique sense of humor, and by unique, I mean childish and kind of stupid, but I liked it. It was good. I got on the police team called the Heat, and we needed a player, so John came out, and then he was a member of the team for about 10 years.
I first met John when he came out of the academy. He was assigned to the shift that I was on, and we hit it off right away. I really appreciated his twisted sense of humor, and before you know it, we were hanging out even off duty.
He's kind of a quiet guy, but he was the guy that always had that little kind of look when you talked to him on him that he was probably up to, I don't want to say no good, but there's a little mischievousness in there for sure.
John was way nicer than the rest of us. Like, I'll put myself at the top of that list, like, way nicer guy than me. And he just had a better disposition. Like, he looked at life differently.
The first thing I think that I noticed about John is that he was extremely polite, well-mannered and well-spoken.
We used to go to California, so I missed those. The road trips we had were unreal. He had his old convertible Ford Fairlane, and almost every summer, like this time of year, we're getting out of school. I mean, we did it in high school. It was crazy. We'd just get in the car and just drive down to Newport Beach.
When I would see him in the patrol briefing area, and you would say, hey John, how's it going? And he had this little look. I see it in the picture that's hanging up or inside with the motorcycle. That little grin on his face, he would just give you that little smile, like, and you just knew, you know, he's quiet, but I missed that little smile that he had.
One of John's favorite things to do was to torment people, and the guy he liked to torment the most was Mike Mullen, and so I liked that even better. So like he would do things like, for example, he'd phone Mike Mullen up and he would grunt. He wouldn't say anything intelligent, he would just grunt. So Mike would say hello and John would go, ugh. And then that would be his entire conversation until Mike lost his mind, which usually took about a minute, and then he would scream at Goyer and hang up the phone, and then John would phone me and we'd laugh about it.
John Goyer and his partner went to a domestic violence call. At that call, they had to make an arrest of the man who'd threatened his partner. What ensued was quite a fight, quite a struggle. And in that struggle, after they managed to get handcuffs on him, John Goyer had sustained a serious blow to the head, to his neck, to his back, to his left shoulder, to his right knee. He was really hurt. And so he went off, and everybody expected, of course, a young man like him, fit man, would get better.
He was living in North Vancouver at the time, and so he went into the Emerge there. And it was a bit of good luck on his part, if there was any luck in this story. There was a Dr. Eisen who happened to be one of the world's very well-respected doctor who specialized in ALS. Anyway, John never came back to work afterwards and was subsequently diagnosed with ALS.
People with ALS have told me they feel like it's living in a glass coffin when it gets to the end stages where they can't do anything for themselves. They're completely immobilized, but their mind is constantly working. That being said, the nervous system is not affected. So you can imagine having to lie in the same position hour after hour, day after day, week after week, sometimes years like that, not being able even to scratch your nose. How frustrating that must be for a person.
Called him, and he told me on the phone he was crying, and I couldn't believe it. I was really upset by it, and of course, as it progressed, I mean, it's just hard to make sense of, really.
Man, he had started to get some numbness and a bit of slurring in his voice, and we were asking what's wrong, and he didn't know. So after that weekend, though, that we went away, when he came back, the email went out after, I guess, on the Monday, to all of us, and it just froze me. It said, guys, I went to see our friend, we call him Doc because he's a doctor, went to see the doc, and he says, the reason for my slurring and whatnot is because I have ALS. They've given me 2 to 5, and I froze at my desk. I could still remember the day, and it was, he said, don't come see me or anything, I want to be alone, but my staff left the garage, shut down my computer. I went right down to his apartment, and he let me in. He opened the door, and we just hugged, and it was, it was tear-jerking. It still is, and we didn't know what to do. We just cried a bit, hugged, cried, and then now.
I remember telling my wife how awful it was that this had happened to John, and that he might have MS, and then when we found out he had ALS, it was even worse. Like, I wished at that point that he would have had MS because he wasn't then given a death sentence so young.
He hated losing, and it bothered him more than anything that he was going to lose to ALS, and he knew that. So.
And over the next few months, things got worse for him. And finally, in December 7th, 2001, he was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. A horrible prognosis, and the doctor immediately advised that it really had arisen as a result of his injuries on that day.
So when I arrived at the hospital, I was given the opportunity to go upstairs and say goodbye to John. So I remember riding up in the elevator and preparing myself for what I knew I was going to see when I got there. So I walked into the hospital room, and John was laying in the bed. His sister was beside him holding his hand. He was sitting up, sort of 3/4 propped up in bed, and his head was tilted off to one side, and he had a face cloth on his shoulder to catch the drool. His eyes just had this blank stare in his eyes. I knew that John would be able to hear me and understand what I was saying, even though his body was gone. So I went over to the bed and I leaned in, and I let John know that he fought the good fight and that it was okay to let go. And I told him that we would all remember him as a hero, and we would never forget him.
And is that stuck with you to this day?
It's that memory, unfortunately, of John in that hospital bed that is burned into my memory.
And so it was that he went through this horrible disease with as much pride and good humor and courage as he possibly could muster. But in April 2006, he finally passed away with his friends at his side. An amazing guy who became the Abbotsford Police Department's first line of duty death.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the House today to pay tribute to Constable John Goyer, a member of the Abbotsford Police Department. Constable Goyer passed away recently after a long and courageous battle with ALS. Tragically, his disease was caused by injuries that he sustained during an on-duty fight while arresting a suspect.
On April 27, 2006, hundreds of law enforcement officers marched from MSA Arena down Bevan Avenue to St. Anne's Catholic Church, where Abbotsford Fire and Rescue Service had hoisted a 40-foot Canadian flag between two ladder trucks. The procession was led by the Vancouver Police Mounted Squad and the RCMP Pipes and Drums, followed by an Abbotsford Police Ceremonial Unit Honor Guard who escorted John's casket to the church.
At the funeral, I delivered the eulogy. I remember up to that point, I'd actually felt relieved that this had happened for John. I'd known for some time that he wanted to go a lot earlier, and so obviously he was at peace, and you know, it was a great deal of relief for me too, because I knew my friend was now in peace.
Golfing, sitting on a patio, having a pint, and you know, we talk about him a lot. So I also miss just talking about my friend John Goyer rather than my friend John Goyer who passed away from ALS.
John has been honored by having his name added to the Abbotsford Police and Fire Memorial Wall here behind City Hall. His name has also been inscribed on the BC Law Enforcement Memorial, which is the bastion located behind the Parliament buildings in Victoria. John has also been added to the National Police and Peace Officers Memorial in Ottawa.
You've been with me the whole time. You've been right here next to me, and in many ways he's changed my life for the better. And, whenever we get together, we talk about John. There's always 2 or 3 different stories about Goyer, and we have a good laugh, and we miss you.
Johnny, if you were standing in front of me, if you're listening, I just miss your friendship. We go back a long way, man, over 4 decades, and there's just an emptiness in a lot of ways, even just driving up here and seeing so many places that we have memories growing up in North Van. You can't replace that. And I just feel so bad that you got ripped off.
So, you know, I'd say, hey, I miss you, man. I would love to talk hockey about you. The Sedins, man, they were your star picks. They're still going. And when that phone used to ring and we're watching a Canuck game and there's that lousy goal, when my phone ever rings during a Canuck game and he would just pick up, and I pick up the phone, he wouldn't even say anything. He'd just hang up on me. So a lot of times when I have a hang up call, I do think of him.
The golf tournament helps us immensely. The ALS Society BC is dependent on our donors and our fundraisers like the Abbotsford Police Department to work with us to raise the fund to support people living with ALS and our programs, as well as ALS research. On an annual budget of $2 million a year is what's is needed to provide the services. We count on everyone to help us.
Echo 7 from Abbotsford. Echo 7 from Abbotsford. Echo 7, Constable Goyer from Abbotsford. Constable Goyer is 10-7.